Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to video number 18 in the How to Make a 2D Platformer course. In today's video we're going to take a look at creating a screen shake effect. So we are going to be making this camera shake script that is going to apply to most games, and that should be pretty easy to implement. So without further ado, let's open up Unity. And before we get started, I just want to mention that if you have any questions throughout this video, go to forum.brackeys.com as always. Cool. So I don't know why it's giving errors there, but we should be good to go anyways. And I'll just clear up that notification there. And I will make a Unity Visual Studio video how to integrate the two nicely. Don't worry, I've promised you that now on the last platformer course or a platformer video. You guys told me that you wanted to see that, so don't worry, I'll get around to it soon. But let's get started. So if we check out our main GM object here, this is kind of where I want our screen shake to sit. You could also place it on the main camera, but just to make it kind of more modular, I'll place it on the GM object and just think that makes a bit more sense. And we'll name this camera shake as it says there. So camera shake and then new script and of course C#. So we create an add there and double click it to open it up in Visual Studio, and it's opening up on my secondary monitor here. So I'll just drag it over and zoom in. Cool. So we can start out by firstly creating a reference to the camera that we want to shake. So a public camera here, and we're just going to call that maybe main cam or just cam. I'll call this main cam. And then we'll have a private variable that stores the shake amount, and we'll default that to 0. Then in our kind of awake function here, I like using awake for setting up references instead of start. It's generally better to do it in awake. Then we're going to check if our main cam is equal to null, and if it is, we'll just set it to the main camera, like this. So you don't necessarily have to provide a reference in the editor. I don't think we'll be doing that. Cool. So we can delete the start and update. We will not be needing those. And instead, we'll make a void, just a private one called begin shake. And this here will of course start the shaking effect. And down here we'll make one called stop shake. Cool. But every time we want to shake the camera, we don't want to call first begin shake and then tell it how much to shake and then for how long and then call the stop shake and all that. We want that to just be in one method. So we're going to make kind of this more general method, which we're going to make public so we can call it from an outside script. And we'll just call that simply shake. And for that, we are going to take in a float with the amount and a float with the length. Kind of the how long the shake should last. And then inside of this, we'll set the shake amount, the private variable that we declare up here, equal to our amount that we've passed in as an argument. And then we're going to do what is called invoke a method, and we're going to use the invoke repeating method to do that. So basically what we do here is we say that we want to call this begin shake method. We want to do that in 0 seconds, so immediately, and we want it to repeat every 0.01 seconds. So this way we can control how quickly things will shake. So every time that this kind of gets called, which is 0.01 seconds, we are going to do a shaking effect. So this is a pretty easy way, syntax-wise, to do a shaking loop. And then we are going to invoke the stop shake method. And make sure you get the names right here. It's not going to give you an error if you don't. and we're gonna stop shaking in length. So basically what we're saying here is that we wanted to begin this shaking method and just repeat that, and then after X amount of seconds, which is called length, it should stop shaking, and down here we'll then stop it from repeating. So let's start out by saying if shake amount is greater than 0, so if we should be shaking at all, then we want to set float, and we'll just call this shake mtx equals, or kind of, this is actually the amount that it's going to be shaking. So we'll just set that equal to random dot value, and we'll multiply that with shake amount, and we'll multiply it with 2, and then do minus shake amount. And now you might be asking, why do we do this exact calculation here? And the answer doesn't really exist. I just looked up on the internet. I wanted to do some camera shaking and thought, what would be a nice way of calculating where the camera should be? And I found this calculation right here, which I thought looked pretty great inside. You could also just do a random value and then multiply it by shake amount, and it should give you something interesting. But I thought this actually looked pretty nicely in game. So you can of course play around with that equation and see if you can make it look even more awesome. And we do this individually for the different axes in order to get a cool looking shake, so not kind of this diagonal shaking which some games have, which looks ridiculous. So make sure to do a different random value for each axis, or it's going to look weird. You can of course only include this on one axis. You could also do the z-axis if you wished to do that, but since we're using an orthogonal camera, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. Cool, so now we're going to declare a vector3. Actually, I want to do that up here, I think. So we're going to make a vector3 here, which is just going to store the cam position from before, so we can set it back right after. So we're going to do mainCam.transform.position, and then down here we can simply say that we want the cam pos to .x to be multiplied or added by the shake amount x. And we're going to do the same with the y here. So plus equals shake amount y. And then down here we can say that mainCam.transform.position should be equal to cam.pos. So basically what we're doing here is we are creating a temporary variable that we are setting equal to the position of the camera. We are then making two float values that will kind of equal how we want to offset our camera. So we could call this offset amount. I actually might go ahead and do that. I think I'll do that just so we don't confuse it with the shake amounts up there. So we'll just call this offset x and apply, and just refactor this one also. So just call that one offset y, just like that. So I've just simply renamed those. And I think that makes a lot of sense. Then we add that onto the x-axis and the y-axis, and then we kind of put the position of a temporary variable back into the main cam's transform.position. So that should update the position when we are done calculating. So now that we kind of have that in place, what we simply need to do down here is we want to cancel the invoke that we've started. And the one we want to cancel is the begin shake. And then down here we can say mainCam.transform.local position and simply set that to vector3.0. And the reason why I'm setting it to vector3.0 here is that I want to do a neat thing in the hierarchy that will make sure that we don't confuse the positions. So one thing that you will often run into is some issues between the camera shaking and the camera following or camera tracking script that you're using. Those can often conflict, and that will just make things look super weird. So what we're going to do instead here, now that we've saved this and hopefully see no errors, we don't, so that's great. There we see the main cam variable. So the thing we are going to be doing here is we'll take the main camera and we'll just make an empty object, and we'll call this just camera, and then we'll copy the transform value, so copy component of the main camera, paste them into paste component values into the camera object, then drag the main camera under camera, then copy the camera 2D follow component and remove it from here, and then paste it as a new component onto the camera. So now basically what we have is this setup where we have an empty camera object that only has the kind of job of following the player, and then under that we have a main camera which position is now relative to the camera object. So we can shake this freely and everything will be relative to the camera. So the cool thing about this is that when we want it to reset, we can simply say that we want the mainCam.transform.local position to be equal to 0,0,0. So that's super cool and makes things a whole lot easier, and yeah, definitely easier to understand. So now that we have that in place, I'm kind of wondering if I want this to be called begin shake or if I just want it to be called do shake. I think I want it to be do shake here, because that's kind of more accurate with its actual function. So now that we have that in place, we should be able to call the shake method from wherever. And just to test this, let's make a quick update function here. And we'll just check if input.getKeyDown, get key down, and we'll check for keycode.t for test. And if we get that key, we'll just simply call shake with an amount of, let's see, 0.1f and a length of 0.2f. There, so that's a pretty quick shake. So now when we hit play, we should see that when we hit T, the camera quickly shakes. Awesome. So now that we have that in place, we can implement this into different places in our game. So for example, whenever we destroy an enemy and it makes an explosion, we don't have the particle system for that yet, but then we could shake the camera, or whenever we fire a powerful gun, we could shake the camera. We could go under the player here, go under arm, pistol, go into the weapon script, and in here, we could do a separate variable that kind of stores the amount that we would like to shake. So I actually think that's a pretty good idea. So let's make a separate variable here, a public float, and let's do cam shake amount and set that equal to 0.f by default. And the length here, I think we'll just keep at a standard rate. I don't see why we should mess with that in here. I mean, some weapons might cause a longer shake, but I don't think it's very necessary to expose that. So then when we find the shoot here, we also call an effect here method. And I think it's in here that we should do this. So one thing that we would like to do is maybe just make a comment here and then say handle camera shaking. And in here we would probably also want a reference, just a private one, to the camera shake. So we'll do a camera, and actually we'll do a camera shake, of course, and we'll just call this cam shake. And now we should be able to reference this. So in the awake method, we'll do underscore GM, or actually let's do this in the start method just to make sure that our GM object is completely set up at this stage. So in here we should be able to do GameMaster.gm dot get component, and then say camera shake like this. Should be valid, cool. And then we'll simply set cam shake equal to that. Whoops, looks like I've hit a wrong key here. So, okay, so we'll set cam shake, if I can spell this correctly, equal to GameMaster.gm.getComponent camera shake. So remember, we set up the game master so that we could also always get the local instance by doing .gm, and then .getComponent to find the camera shake on that object. So now down here, actually we'll just write out an error if that didn't work. So we'll say if cam shake is equal to null, then we'll simply debug.error log error, and we'll say no camera shake script found on GM objects. So that should be pretty descriptive. We could also just make it so that you don't need a camera shake object, but I think that we'll just set it up this way. You can of course exclude this if you're not interested in it, but I just think it makes it kind of a lot more interesting to look at when we have the shaking effect when cool things happen. So then under the private void effect, pretty much at any point we could do this. I'm just going to do it at the end here. We'll just shake the camera, and we'll do this by saying cam shake dot shake, and we'll input the amount, which is going to be the cam shake amount, and we'll do that with a length of, let's try 0.2f. Cool. So we head back into Unity, and we should see the variable appearing here in 1 second. There it is, the shake amount. And now when we fire, whoops, we get an error. So what's going on here? So it's saying that the object reference is not set to an instance of the object. Okay, so that basically means that cam shake is not currently equal to anything. And that means that this probably has failed. But did we actually get an error message? We did not. So I'll just quickly investigate this and then get back to you in a moment. Okay, so I found out what was wrong here. And if we take a look here, it says null reference exception, object reference not set to an instance of an object. And it does so at the start method. So if we double click that, it highlights this line right here. And that's kind of weird, because if it says that it cannot find the reference here, it can't be the cam shake, because that's what we are setting equal to. So kind of what we have to think here is that it doesn't know how to access get component because GM doesn't exist. And indeed, when I went to investigate this, I was correct. So if we open up the game master, you'll notice that we are setting the GM reference, or the GM variable, inside a start method. And that's really not something we want. We want to set this inside of an awake method, so we can be sure that it's already set in the start method. So now that we've changed this to awake, we should be actually able to access this, and things should be working. So let's try again. Let's hit play. And let's try and shoot here, and you can see that the camera indeed does shake. This is a pretty crazy shaking amount, and I actually think that the length is a bit too long. So I changed my mind about that. Let's just expose this anyway. So let's do a float with the cam shake length. And we'll just set that equal to something like 0.1f, and I would like to default this a bit lower. So now down here, all we have to do is simply put in the cam shake length also. So now inside of our pistol here, we should see this updating, and then we can bump down the amount here and keep the length at 0.1. And let's try this again. I think that's a bit more reasonable with the camera shake. You might think this is still a bit too much, since this is not a crazy powerful gun, but I actually think it looks pretty good so far. Cool, so that was basically it. What I want to do very soon is I want to add some particles, explosion particles, to this enemy. I know I teased that in the last video, but I now really want to do that. And also we should of course make the camera shake when that explodes. We should also get a game in here, some way for our enemies to strike back. And maybe some point systems. There are lots of things to be done. So cool, that was basically it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in the next one.